please come into my room.
Welcome to the MUstaSH Room. I'm your host, David Ben. Find us online at mustashroom.com. At MUstaSH Room, we are sponsored by MUstaSH Brands. You can spell that MUSTASH. Thank you so much for being with us. We are rejoined by Molly. This time she talks to us about holotropic breathwork. She's certified, spent a lot of years studying and perfecting the craft, has some really cool things to talk about. A way of getting to an altered state of consciousness without consuming any plant-based medicine. So it's purely based on breathwork and bodywork. We also get a visit from my lovely wife, Jill, and we discuss the Amanita muscaria mushroom and how people and creatures have historically consumed it for some interesting reasons, and how it might be tied to more fiction and holiday-specific fiction than you may already know. Be on the lookout for upcoming entheogenic mushroom cultivation to consumption courses. We're going to try to do more of those and partner with some fitness organizations. And send us an email, info@mustashroom.com if you have any questions or suggestions. Thanks again for being here. Enjoy this episode. You're in high demand these days.
Let's just say that it's not in any less demand. Yes.
That's awesome. So would you say that you're doing more work with the MDMA medicine or more work with the psilocybin these days?
It's probably right down the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
maybe a little bit weighing a little bit towards the psilocybin.
It's been getting a lot of press lately. You know, there was the Newsweek article and, you know, there's always things popping up. So I could see it being more popular just because it's touching the mainstream a little bit.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So, you know, at first it was Michael Pollan's book, but now it's just the New York Times, Times Magazine. It's the thing for sure.
Cool. Well, you know, that's kind of the theme of this podcast. So I'm glad it's a thing. We'll embrace it as will everybody else. But one of the reasons that I wanted to have you back and I gave you a heads up, holotropic breathing or holotropic breathwork, you see it a lot when people talk about psychedelics, enhanced forms of consciousness, mystical experiences, all that stuff. And I spoke to you real briefly about it. And a buddy of mine, Sean, who's a yoga practitioner, he's also has some experience with holotropic breathwork. But I really don't know the exact sequences or, you know, the ins and outs of the type of work. So I know you having experience with it. I was hoping you could give us a little insight into how that works and what it actually yields in terms of effectiveness.
Yeah. So about as of 2 years ago, I become certified as a holotropic breathwork facilitator.
Cool.
It took me 7 years.
It's like 600 hours, right?
Oh, it's a lot of time, energy, money. Yeah, it's not just a quick weekend. It's 7 week-long modules, and then you have to apprentice, and then you have to have extra experiences of your own. So they make sure
7 years. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the slow track because I was working full time, and then I was going to school. So, but it's been the most by far valuable experience to prepare me for the work that I'm doing. So they're using holotropic breathwork. And let me just make it perfectly clear. There's a lot of forms of breathwork out there. There's many different, and they're not all one and the same. So most of them have very specific criteria. So I just want to let people know that holotropic breathwork is not the same as any other work.
Okay.
So it was developed by Stanislav Grof, who was a psychiatrist back in the 60s and 70s. He's still alive in his mid-90s. He had done a lot of facilitating LSD-assisted psychotherapy. He had administered over 2,000 hours with clients and just, he was really on the cutting edge of the research along with some other people. But when it became illegal, he and his wife spent 10 years really traveling the world, immersing themselves in different cultures, trying to find a way that they can induce the same experience as psychedelics, an altered state of consciousness. Gotcha. And he coined the term holotropic state of consciousness. Holotropic means moving towards wholeness.
Okay.
So moving towards wholeness. And the reason he coined that term is because there's many forms of altered state of consciousness that aren't necessarily in a healing context. You can have an altered state of consciousness by ingesting toxins. You can, there's a lot of ways that aren't necessarily intentionally meant for healing. So he termed holotropic, moving towards wholeness, holotropic breath work. So I think it's been 35, 40 years that he and his wife spent 10 years developing this technique that incorporates the breath, provocative music. There's some very distinct ways in which a skilled facilitator can work with the person somatically. So providing some resistance for the person to push against to catalyze a somatic breakthrough.
So the body's much more involved in this process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So unlike psychedelics, there's it can be quite cathartic. If you go to a holotropic breathwork module, which is where people go to get trained, but also the public can go, you can walk into that room and go, oh my God, what is happening? There's people screaming, it can be quite dynamic.
Wow.
So that's how it's quite different from other forms of inducing altered states of consciousness. It's often done in a group.
Okay.
The group aspect of it can be quite powerful, just bearing witness to each other. The form is such that people split up into pairs, and it's quite fascinating and magical how that actually happens. And people will tell you, oh my God, it was so bizarre. I ended up with this person and I ended up realizing I went to the same high school, or, it's just quite synchronistic.
Sure.
But it's done in pairs. So you have a sitter that's there by your side. The session itself is anywhere between 2 hours and 15 minutes and 3 hours. So it's not a quick 15 minutes of breathing. There's an introduction and an orientation before everyone starts, just talking about some of the history and the form. But it's done usually in a group. People are in pairs, and one person will breathe and the other person will sit. And the sitter is there and being present for the person and meeting that person, supporting that person in any way they possibly can. So that's why they're using holotropic breathwork in some of the programs like CIIS and MAPS to train future psychedelic therapists, because it's the closest experiential piece that they can get, because it's illegal to use substances.
Sure. So plant-based medicine, without being a factor, they can still do it.
So without using substances, the holotropic breathwork is the closest that they could come to the form which they're training people to use to sit for people when the substances become legal.
So it's a 1-to-1 ratio between sitter and person person doing the breathwork?
Yeah, and then you have facilitators, depending on how big the group is, but there's certified facilitators there. The sitters don't engage in the somatic work.
Okay.
That kind of takes a lot of skills. It's very nuanced. So it's the facilitator that would engage in helping release somatic blockages, contractions, that sort of thing.
So kind of like a yoga instructor, if you will, if you need to adjust your pose or something like that. They kind of oversee the room a little bit.
Yeah, that you kind of walk around and people might call you over and just engage, and then you kind of use intuition, like, well, maybe what if I kind of meet your resistance in this area, and the person pushes, uses the facilitator push against, and sometimes it can get quite dynamic.
Wow. And I guess you have to have a lot of trust too with your sitter or your facilitator because of the somatic element. Whereas with the other psychedelic experience, it's much more cerebral.
Yeah, it's much more hands-off, literally.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole module that's on the bodywork piece. So you really, you learn to see what the person might need. You learn how to facilitate that piece. And touch in this realm of altered states of consciousness is very, very precarious. You have to really, really know what you're doing. And those are the boundaries that can get crossed really easily, not even intentionally.
Sure.
So you have to be really careful about asking permission and communicating with the person as you're working with them, because touch in this realm, whether it's with substances or otherwise, can really re-traumatize someone if it's not done in a skillful way. You could talk to people, you could read some of Groff's stuff. I mean, anything can happen in breath work. It's pretty, I mean, the difference is there's an off switch. So you can titrate the experience a bit more as the person. Whereas with substances, there's no turning back. You kind of, you're along for the ride. You got to ride it out. With the breath work, you can use your breath to modulate it. And so sometimes it takes experiencing the terrain and trusting the terrain to really understand how deep you can go.
Okay.
But some people who are quite the psychonauts would tell you that they've had just as strong and a powerful experiences with the breath work as they have with psychedelics.
Oh,
so
cool.
the potential's there.
Now, when you screen people to work with, do you have extra physical considerations or things that you take into account? Okay.
Yeah,
like what?
There's you have to be careful of cardiovascular issues because the breathing can increase heart, blood pressure, heart rate, retina, issues with the eyes, anything where a build up of pressure could be a problem. You have to be careful with breath work. So there are definitely contraindications.
Okay. And how long does it take before you actually enter the mystical experience? You said 2 to 3 hours, or 2 hours and 15 minutes to 3 hours total. Does it take that long to actually get into that state, or is that the full come up and come down?
There's no guarantee. First of all, you're going to have a mystical experience.
Okay.
It's just there's no guarantees there. Unlike with substances, which kind of can break through defenses, some people will do breath work and say nothing happened, or they just can't let go because it's in a group setting. The groupness can add a component to it. Some people, they'll say they're out and off and gone in 15 minutes after the music starts and they start breathing.
Okay.
Other people, they might say, I didn't appreciate the potential of the experience until my 5th breathwork session. It just all depends.
Okay. So
everybody's response is different.
A little less reliable or a little less consistent as opposed to a substance where you can just dose it out.
It's a little, people will use voice and sound, and that's what I mean. It can be much more dynamic.
Okay.
They can move around a lot more. It's usually done on a futon mat on the floor, and there's pillows and blankets everywhere. So as a sitter and as a facilitator, you're attending to the person's safety. So they might be starting to hit the floor or something, and you're putting pillows under, or they might start moving around. I mean, people have actually experienced re-experienced their own birth. It's quite fascinating, some of the experiences people have had. So it can get very dynamic, much more so than you would see in most psychedelic sessions. Yeah.
If somebody out there was to look into working with somebody with holotropic breathwork, would you say if they don't have that certification that you have, all the labor-intensive training, that they should not work with that person, or is there a sub-certification or something that might show that they have enough experience?
If a person is not certified by the Groff Transpersonal Training Organization, they can't call it holotropic breathwork.
Okay.
They could call it they can call it something else. But if someone is calling it holotropic breathwork, they are supposed to be, certified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
and with the music that they play, is there, I know with my psychedelic experiences and with ours, there were a lot of instruments and not a lot of vocals where you could actually make out what they were saying, chanting, things like that. Is it similar with the breathwork? Okay.
Yeah. The only difference is that there's a very distinct trajectory in the holotropic breathwork session, and it's broken up into 3 parts. So the first hour is you're kind of building up the energy. It's very percussions, drums. It's very vibrant. And then it'll get epic. There will be kind of a breakthrough. So it's meant to carry you through this experience, so that the second hour is kind of epic and more like movie track type music. And then the last hour, it kind of tapers and brings you down, and is much more subtle and a little bit more relaxing. So you're kind of going through this journey. So the music, the trajectory of the music is much different.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I figured it would have some sort of accompanying playlist. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and you'll never hear the same playlist twice. I mean, there's a whole week that's dedicated to creating it to the music.
Fantastic.
There's a whole module, and there's a whole module on the bodywork. So that there's a lot of nuances in training. It's not just slapping together a bunch of, just soundtracks. There's quite there's an art to it.
Yeah, I read, and Groff's name pops up everywhere when you read about psychedelics. But I was reading that the certification that you have, and I'm not sure it's the same exact one, 600 hours of training mandatory. And that's really exhaustive. So 7 years, 600 hours. You have to really respect the art and the practice. So that's
you can't get certified. They won't let you certify in less than 2 years.
Okay.
Like you can't go faster, because part of it is exploring your own inner transformation as you're going through the training, because it can be quite provocative. It can bring up things, and it's not a guarantee you're going to pass the certification. There's some people where you have to go through a 2-week kind of certification process at the end of all the requirements. And that's where you kind of get really assessed, and it's kind of, it's not a given.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
One of these days I'll have to, I don't know if you do seminars or like how you approach it, but I'd like to see, how it goes down and see if it can work for me.
Yeah, actually there's a nonprofit that we're just launching that I'm helping with. It's called the Groff Legacy Project.
Oh, cool.
And they're going to have 2 tracks. They're going to have a breathwork track where people can engage with what's the equivalent of holotropic breathwork. And then there's going to be the psychedelic experience track, which is very experiential and intended to actually, I hate to say train, but train people in like what MAPS is doing in CIES, but those programs are much less experiential. There's not a lot of actually sitting with people while they're in an altered state of consciousness. And most of it's very academic, very intellectual. So this would provide people with an opportunity to get trained in this realm from a much more experiential place.
Nice. Where is that taking place?
Well, I
mean, if it's not open to the public, we can talk privately, but I was,
it is open to the public.
Cool. Right.
There are certain pieces that are open. Like we're going to have we had a 4-day breathwork retreat scheduled for October, but we canceled because of COVID.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some opportunities where people can come and just experience holotropic breathwork and get 2 breathworks in over the course of 4 days. So I can keep you posted.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, but if people Google Groff Legacy Project USA, they can join the community and be on the email list. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
if people are really, if you're concerned about ingesting any kind of plant-based medicine, or you just have whatever reservations, there's no medicine involved. So, it's, I guess, a nice alternative.
Exactly. And I used to, when it was more accessible, really encourage people to, if there was access to it in their community, to go through a holotropic breathwork, because the form is very similar. There's a lot of the principles that are similar. So it's a great entryway into the psychedelic realm for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned music, and I wanted to, are you familiar with Gabrielle Roth?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
I just came across her
Five
music.
rhythms or is it five rhythms?
Yeah, I haven't really delved into that, but apparently she has matched up life with 5 different distinct rhythms.
Yeah. She's been around for ages, David.
Yeah, she was born in the early 40s, I think.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So my buddy at work, he goes to Burning Man all the time, and I was like, give me somebody that is very heavy on the instrumentals and like plays well with psychedelics, and he introduced me to Gabrielle Roth. She's awesome. I was so smitten by going through the stuff she's done. Have you used her at all in any of your work?
There's others that are more kind of popular, but yeah, if you go to a Breathwork, you'll see her music inserted here and there for sure.
Can you make any like overall, doesn't have to be specific to holotropic breathwork, but can you make any suggestions for those of us that are, looking for somebody that has psychedelic friendly music or playlist?
Yeah. Byron Metcalf is a big one.
Okay.
He's quite popular. Mark Selig is another popular sort of, Lisa Gerard from The Dead Can Dance. She's an amazing, she's a vocalist, but there's no lyrics.
Sure.
She's one of my favorites.
Nothing to draw into, no vocals or anything to get consumed by.
Nothing you're going to probably associate with. She did a lot of the music for Whale Rider. Remember that movie?
No.
That's an old one, but Lisa Gerard is a big one.
Okay.
There's some. Oh God, you're putting me on the spot. But
sorry, I should have given you a heads up.
Wait, I can pull up my playlist.
Yeah.
On Spotify as I'm looking here. Karunish is a group. That's another popular one. Stephen Halpern.
Okay.
Let me see. Not Macy Gray. Yeah. Lisa Gerard. Peter Cater. There's some piano, kind of cello music. Peter Cater's one of those. Sylvia Nakache. She's a great one.
Okay.
Yeah, God, I could go on.
No, that's a good list. I'll make sure that I include those in the show notes, but that gives us a handful to run with.
Then there's a lot of Native American music that's really nice too. Joanne Shenandoah.
Okay.
She's another one, but yeah, some of the Native music can go really well. Michael Hop is another one. Yeah. Music's a powerful component to this work. It's meant to be a carrier wave. And it can also bring up things with people. If we say in breath work, like if you didn't like the music and it's activating you that way, then kind of use that.
Okay.
Kind of,
there's something about it that's triggering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of look into, what is that, and work with the trigger. The key is it shouldn't be a distraction. And so that's why I'll say to people, if the music isn't working, and, I've had people say, there'll be piano and they're like, oh my God, can you turn the piano off? I used to play piano as a kid and my piano teacher's coming up. It's just, so there's, sometimes people have associations with just that, and you don't want it to be that whole focus. So yeah.
Sure. How much integration are you doing like with the holotropic breathwork? Is it consistent with what you do with the other medicines?
Yeah, it's really important, and there's a whole art piece component to the holotropic breathwork where people are invited to go to an art space and create a mandala. So it's quite potent. The idea is that a lot of times getting images down, it's not supposed to be an art piece, but just getting images down before you put words to the experience can be quite powerful. So, that's the psyche. The psyche talks in images and symbols and metaphors. So it's quite amazing when you see someone's mandala, it's like it can just blow your mind, and they don't know where it came from, sort of thing. But yeah. So there is a whole piece there, and then in the breath work, we'll usually have a closing circle each evening. Or if it's a big group, I mean, some of these breathworks are 80 people, 100 people. So they'll break up into smaller groups in the evening so that there's a way that you can put voice and people can bear witness to your experience. So yeah, the integration's a big piece.
Wow. 80 to 100 people. That's got to be intimidating for some.
Yeah. those are the big ones. Those are the quote modules, which they're not like me holding a 2-day retreat. These are the modules where future facilitators are going, but the public can also go, and each module is themed. So one might be the holotropic principles. So it's all about the principles of holotropic breathwork. Another one might be the music. So, but yeah, it can draw quite a crowd.
For the people listening, I really appreciate you taking the time to educate us. And now, we've learned a lot from you in the past, in the couple episodes that you've been on. So hopefully we can wrangle you in for another one. But thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yeah, and people can Google holotropic breathwork, and there's so much that comes up. Or Stanislav Grof. Yeah,
fantastic.
He's quite an institution or a figure in this work. So for sure,
that's great. Well, Molly, I'll let you get back to your work, whatever you're up to. But we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, David.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And now it's time for some education as my lovely wife Jill joins us to talk about mushrooms and health.
You want my wisdom?
Very wise woman.
And then the baby's away.
Baby's away. We can't have the baby anywhere near us for a podcast.
No, it does not work out.
Yeah, just so you know, we tried a couple times. We failed both times. And so we realized when the baby goes to bed, then we can try to record a podcast.
Yeah, or do anything at all.
Exactly. So here we are. And Brody's here silently, hopefully. And we're glad to be back. Post-ternity, episode number 2. Post-ternity. So I had my class. I had my entheogenic mushrooms consumption cultivation class.
Woohoo!
Yes, at Dark Horse Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Denver, Colorado. And we had about 8 people there.
Nice.
Which I thought was a decent turnout. We drank some beers, which I felt was good for just the morale and the comfort level in the classroom.
Yeah.
There's no curriculum or any scholastic constraints. Mm-hmm. So it was fun. Lasted about 3.5 hours, I'd say.
That's a long time.
Yeah. And I constructed the curriculum on my own. Basically, I went through who I am, why I'm doing this, my qualifications for being a teacher, my background as a stand-up comedian, my background as a Microsoft certified trainer, yada, yada, yada. And also my experiences with psychedelics. I wanted to make sure that there was a trust level and I gained credibility because, I'm not some scientist nerd. I'm somebody that's
you're a real guy.
I lived a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then I talked about entheogens, psychedelics and risks.
So basically, entheogens mean psychedelic.
Essentially.
Is that just like a fancy word for it?
It really is.
Okay.
And, psychedelics, there's stigma connotations attached to that term.
Yeah.
So I like to use entheogen, but it's essentially synonymous with psychedelic.
Okay.
Theology is the study of religion. And so there's a little bit of intertwined meaning there, but essentially it's the same thing.
That's interesting. How like the study of religion, like theology.
Yeah.
And entheogen is psychedelic. So how is that connected?
Well, there's the same etymology there somewhere.
Okay.
But essentially
like a god, like there's some sort of god.
Yeah. And depending on which substance you're working with, like there's Mother Ayahuasca and people see deities and other greater powers in some instances. So there is a little bit of overlap.
Okay. I could see that where like in the past, mushrooms have been used in religious ceremonies.
Absolutely.
And psychedelics have been used not like just for fun. It has been used for like a purpose. I
mean, definitely for fun.
Now 60s
and 70s for sure.
Yeah, but I feel like most people assume that it's more tied to just fun and recreational versus, more of the religious or the healing aspect of it.
Well, the Native Americans have kind of they have the monopoly on peyote, or they're at least trying to keep the monopoly on peyote because of its it takes a lot of time to cultivate, and it's something that they use in their religious ceremonies, so it's very sacred to them.
Yeah.
So for a Westerner to say, hey, I guess they're Westerners too, but for somebody to be like, hey, I want to use your medicine in my willy-nilly ceremony or for my experimentation, it kind of trivializes their religion and their ceremony and how they hold it dear.
Yeah. And I know, because where did we learn about that? Was it a documentary? Was it an article?
Might have been a podcast or something where we heard some of those.
It was really interesting because peyote, which is the cactus.
Yeah. Mescaline.
Yeah. It only grows in certain areas, which has been on native land. And
in Texas, mostly in the States. There's an area in Texas that's plentiful with peyote.
Yeah. And they're trying to preserve the original plants because you can reseed and grow it, but it's not the same because it doesn't have the same like sacred
it's not that as much as it is. It's, if people start harvesting it and start using it for things outside of their religious internal use, there might be less of a supply for them to actually use for ceremony. It just, I don't know, it takes away from their ability to kind of corner the market and control it as they see fit. And essentially because it's so sacred to them, a lot of the decriminalized nature movements and stuff are having exceptions for the Native Americans in peyote because of the fact that it's so sacred.
Yeah, I mean, we've already taken so much from
I know,
them.
right?
Like
we're about to celebrate Thanksgiving, which is just a huge dump on their history.
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus is already on the outs. So Thanksgiving might be next.
Are you even allowed to say his name?
Might have to go back.
Well, because we just had Indigenous People Day.
Yeah.
That was recent. It used to be Columbus Day, which now you don't say that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it is, if you really look at it objectively, we're probably better off not celebrating him in his entirety,
Yeah. Oh, totally.
As a explorer and whatnot, maybe he had some accomplishments, but there was a lot of genocide and a lot of imperialism that we can't really get behind.
Yeah. I feel like anyone in that era, that was kind of like your way of survival and your way of, conquering, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just not how we operate today.
So getting back to the course, I wanted to convey, why I resorted to plant-based medicine for my own therapy, what it's done for me, how it manages my default mode network, yada, yada, yada. And I think, building up my relationship with the plant-based medicine and using it respectfully, I think that gave a comfort level with the students to where, okay, this guy may know what he's talking about, and we'll hear him out.
Yeah, I mean, and I think too for like even just men to be open to discussing challenges that they may have, and letting them know that there's alternatives to look at instead of just traditional prescriptions and pharmaceuticals, to deal with things. So yeah, I think you were leading with a great example.
Yeah, and Andrew was there. Felix was there. Felix took a lot of photos and video. Props to Felix. Jackie was actually there with Andrew. So a lot of mushroom enthusiasts that have been on this podcast before made an appearance during the course, and a lot of help from Felix and Andrew just kind of, throughout the course of the course. But yeah, we talked about cultivation, all the different steps, the sterilization requirements. We looked at photos of different types of casing, stages of fruiting, and, all the different facets of mushroom cultivation. We talked about dosing, micro, macro, mini dosing, different ways to consume, the risks, how to do it responsibly, and how to set your set and setting, how to, kind of nurture the environment, make sure you vet your peers, all the big tenets of responsible use of psychedelics. And finally, we talked about integration and just the importance of making sense of your experience and having somebody that you feel comfortable with, opening up and kind of making sure that whatever happened resonates positively and it's a sustained improvement.
So high level, you take a dose, usually a high dose.
This is very high level.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like for the audience.
For sure. Yeah.
So you take a large dose, you retreat to yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah. If I was to macrodose a heroic dose, or
Okay.
if I was to go big,
Yeah.
then yeah, I would establish a set and setting that was extremely comfortable
Okay.
so that I could fully surrender.
So temperature, noise, like eye mask, like completely comfortable, like at a spa, if you will.
Well, I guess the things that I pointed out, the things that are really important to me and important for me to convey to other people, the people you're with, the things on your mind, the devices available, anything that can interrupt your experience or cause anxiety or take your mind somewhere else, those are things that can really compromise both your set and your setting.
Okay.
I mean, if you're with people that you don't feel comfortable with and, something happens, you'll internalize that and it can completely ruin your experience.
Okay.
So you really have to be mindful of your set and setting. So that was really something that we spent a lot of time on, and it's completely up to you. At the last minute, if you feel like you're set, when I say set, I mean your mindset.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like your mindset is adequate to really go deep, then you're better off not doing it.
Okay.
And
So if you've got like a long list of chores or something due the next day, it's probably not the best time.
Yeah. Or, your kid is staying at, somebody else's house, sleeping over at somebody's house, something like that, where you don't have full control of the situation and there are factors that could cause you to doubt your circumstances.
Okay. So that's that. So you take your heroic dose. You
Shout
are
out
in
to
your
Terrence
set.
McKenna.
You're in your set and your setting and
Yeah.
you're enjoying it. Now the integration, when does that come in? Is that immediately, like when you're like, oh, I start to feel normal again? Or is that like the next day? Is that by yourself? Are you working that with someone? Like how do you personally integrate?
So the best way to do it, if you have a relationship with a therapist, is see if your therapist is open-minded to psychedelics. If your therapist says, hey, I'm familiar with psychedelics or I appreciate the space, you can talk openly with them about doing plant-based medicine and kind of have them act as the bookends for your experience.
So like hour 5.
No, I mean,
Or-
I don't think you should look at it that way. Whenever you're ready, I mean, you're going to jot stuff down throughout your experience.
Okay. So that's a good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't want to be conscious of, oh, shoot, I have to remember this or I have to write stuff down. So it has to be
Yeah.
organic. That's why if you have a trip sitter or somebody, they can jot things down for you that you audibly express to them, things like that. But essentially, you're going to want to digest and fully allow things to resonate once the experience is over. And so the timing is, it could fluctuate, but
Okay.
it could be immediately once you're fully, come down from the medicine, but it could be the next day. It could last the entire next week. And it's a process that's it's tailored to the extreme nature of your experience, I guess.
Okay. No, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And then I know you've actually done voice, like you've done like videos into your phone during it too. I don't know if you've ever gone back and looked at those, but
I mean, I have. Yeah. You definitely, you start to get creative and you start to think of things that you normally wouldn't. And so, sometimes you get really excited and you want to share things with the world. So it's best that you have a mechanism to record that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it with a sitter, which is always a good idea if you're new to the experience, they can record that stuff for you and just take
Okay.
the responsibility away. Or you
Cool.
can just shout into a voice recorder or whatever, Alexa, take a note for me or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's just as long as you don't expect to have a dialogue with Alexa. That would be bad. That could
That would
that
be
could turn
interesting.
horribly if you're on a psychedelic experience.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that was in a nutshell, very high level. And then I had
That's great.
resources so that people could go and, figure out how to make bulk casing or agar, liquid culture, soup to nuts, start to finish with mushroom cultivation, and then all kinds of publications and resources, Double Blind Magazine, and just things that are really good for people that are either new to the space or really want to go a little bit deeper to the existing space.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was fun. And I hopefully will have more of those. I've been talking to Sean, who was on the podcast a couple times actually, about maybe doing it with his yoga establishment. So fingers crossed, but we'll keep it going. And if anybody's interested, definitely email the podcast, info@mustashroom.com or info@mustashbrands.com. As always, MUstaSH, MUstaSH. We also wanted to talk about a follow-up from a previous episode. I can't remember. Were we together talking about it on the previous episode?
I feel like we always have a follow-up and we forget to follow up.
Yeah. Well.
So what are you following up on?
Okay. Amanita muscaria, aka fly agaric. We talked about how it's kind of the most recognizable mushroom.
Yeah.
It's the Mario mushroom. It's the mushroom that has the same color scheme as Santa Claus.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fiction that's derived from this type of mushroom. It's the red cap with the white speckles.
Yeah, and it grows plentiful in Colorado, apparently.
Oh, yeah. When I was in Telluride for the mushroom festival, a lot of the people on the foray came back with huge Amanita muscaria mushrooms. Huge.
And when you say huge, how big? Like the size of your hand?
Could be like, the cap was like 5 inches in diameter.
That's a huge ass
Yeah,
mushroom.
like a coffee can, a little bit smaller than a coffee can.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And then the shade of red varies, right? It could be bright or it could be like an orangey red.
Yeah, I would say the spectrum would be like just bright red to like a darker brick red.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, so in that spectrum, but it definitely has those white dots. They almost look like zits. It's kind of gross on there.
Ew.
But
what about moles?
Moles. They're white moles. They're albino moles, if you will. Yes. So Amanita muscaria, I have never consumed Amanita muscaria. I've heard from Paul Stamets and some other people that are pretty well known in the space that it may cause stomach discomfort. So I guess I'm being a little bit of a scaredy pants. But I know Chris wants to try it, so it may happen. But ultimately, it's supposed to cause some sort of hallucinogenic effect, some sort of psychedelic experience, not akin to psilocybin, but still kind of freaky.
And I don't know. Do we have data if people have died from taking this one?
No, I don't think the poison is that extreme. I think it's more of just a
Maybe
digestive system issue,
or based on how much you consume.
Yeah.
But when we went to Telluride last year and we went to their farmer's market and they were selling, there was a mushroom stand.
Yeah.
And we found a dried bag of this mushroom. And David was like, oh my God, it's like the mythical, creature. And we grabbed some and we were talking with the guy and we're like, how do you cook with this? Because he was selling all culinary mushrooms and this was the only one that he had, on the spectrum, if you will. So
on the spectrum.
Well, yeah, like the psychedelic spectrum.
There you go.
So he said, and he kind of chuckled, like we're kind of talking the same language. And he's like, well, because they're dried and you rehydrate them and then you can cook with them, but you do not want to drink the liquid is what he said. And if you just think of all the science with it, psilocybin mycelium is how it grows. Psilocybin is water soluble. So the psychoactive element is in the water. It's not in the mushroom itself. So when you rehydrate the mushrooms, it pulls out the psychedelic. So we can easily rehydrate these and cook with them. It's the water that would then make you high.
Gotcha.
Or give you the effect.
And in that book we bought from the Telluride Mushroom Festival, the culinary mushroom book,
yes,
he talks about exactly how to prepare Amanita muscaria to nullify any of those weird body effects or things that the average person wouldn't want to experience.
Exactly.
And
so
it was in the ceviche that he served.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can still if you find these and you want to consume them, for not the typical reason, you can. Well, I guess his wouldn't be dried out. If you found them fresh, I wonder how you would do that fresh.
Yeah, normally they're not going to be dried.
Maybe just boiled. Maybe if you boiled them, it would pull out the toxin.
But yeah, if you look online on how to prepare, Amanita muscaria mushrooms for culinary use, there's a method to get rid of the toxins.
Okay.
And again, we can't firsthand speak for the toxins and what that means.
Done it. Yeah.
So I may have a follow-up episode. There's that follow-up promise again. And
no, we need to jot down the follow-ups.
Yeah, we need to have some show notes. Brody, all right, he's just sitting there. So yeah, the cool thing though is deer for some time, and you may have heard this, other people talk about it, but deer have specifically found this particular mushroom to be a nice little treat for them reindeer specifically. And so if you think about the hallucinogenic effects on a reindeer and how they have a fondness for Amanita muscaria mushrooms, flying reindeer with Santa seems all that more plausible based on this sort of reality.
What's the difference between a deer and a reindeer?
Ooh.
I'm wondering, because they grow in Colorado and there's deer in Colorado, is it just...
Here, the main difference between deer and reindeer, which, why is it spelled R-E-I-N? Anyway, the main difference between deer and reindeer is that the deer is adapted to moderate climates, whereas the reindeer is adapted to cold climates.
Okay, so like more northern territory.
Yeah, like a polar deer.
I like that name.
Yeah.
Polar deer.
So it's a polar deer.
Okay.
And so anyways, deer, reindeer,
Okay.
I'll just consider them interchangeable.
Because we can call just Colorado deer, they eat the same thing and it's same
Sure.
effects.
Sure. Yeah, it all sounds good.
Okay.
So deer versus reindeer. Now you have that knowledge. You can put that.
it.
You can put that in your pocket. They like the Amanita muscaria, and they actually influenced people to harvest their urine, like reindeer herders and other people that were farming to harvest their urine, so that they could harness those same effects, the same hallucinogenic. Man, I cannot say that word. The same, we'll say, psychedelic effects that were impacting the reindeer that were consuming it.
How are they collecting the urine?
That's another good question. I don't have that answer. I don't believe there's a follow-up for that.
There's no follow-up. That is proprietary information.
Definitely. So the reason that they were harvesting the urine, and again, we don't have the means that they used.
Oh, I think I just kind of jumped ahead. So they found the herders started collecting urine, testing it out to see if they could have the effects.
No, I think they just looked at the reindeer, and the reindeer, let's see, it says here what happens to them.
But if they saw the reindeer eating the mushrooms, why didn't they just skip the urine and eat the mushrooms?
That's a good question too, and I don't have the answer to that either.
No follow-up.
No follow-up. It said here that if they eat the fungi or fungi, depending on which one you prefer, they behave, and this is the reindeer, behave drunkenly, run about aimlessly, and make strange noises. Head twitching is also common. So maybe they saw this happen, and they're like, the only way I can harness the energy of these reindeer is to drink their piss. And lo and behold, it worked for them. And we have some science, and we have some terms that I still can't pronounce that explain why the urine is so plentiful with things that make you feel drunken.
Actually, go back to that article.
Oh, okay.
So it says so these mushrooms have long been used by man, but are known to be toxic. So they try to avoid eating them directly, whereas the reindeer can eat them without any harm. And then they observe their effects. So they were so gung-ho on getting high that they're like, let's drink some piss.
Yeah, and that's amazing that the reindeer can just eat as much as they want, completely immune. They can just get a little drunker. Yeah,
they have, different ways to process it.
That's crazy. So there's the science behind this. And basically it says the removal of the carboxyl radical from ibotenic acid that the Amanita muscaria contains results in the psychoactive molecule mucimol or mucimol. This transformation of molecules is driven by the metabolic process of decarboxylation.
Decarboxylation.
Decarboxylation. However, the liver is not very efficient at this process. So about 85% of the ingested ibotenic acid leaves the body unaltered via urine. Your piss contains 5 times the amount of the drug that your body is capable of absorbing. So basically what that means is you don't really get much out of consuming the actual mushroom. You only get 15% of the psychoactive components. The other 85% leaves your body in your piss. So if you were to drink that, if you consume that urine, it says, let's see, if you've consumed a mushroom, you can piss into a bottle and hand it over to your buddy, who drinks it and becomes a temporary drug mule. Then later on, he pisses into the same bottle, hands it over to the next person in line, blah, blah, blah. Essentially 5 or 6 times, it says. So once it's activated in the urine, it becomes 85% potent, and it continues that way essentially. So it's what is that? A human centipede of psychoactive urine?
Oh God, that South Park episode.
That's crazy.
I mean, I have to point out, it would be ill will if we don't do this, but drinking your urine is not good, or drinking someone's urine is not good.
And that's why one of the reasons we have you here is to tell us what we should put in our body. So tell us why urine is not good to put in our body,
So
even though it's already in our body.
So your kidneys filter out toxins. So anything you eat, anything you drink, it goes through your kidneys and it filters out these toxins that are then excreted from your body. So some things are absorbed, some things are not.
Okay.
For instance, like artificial sugars, your body can't absorb them. They literally just pass through your body
as diarrhea.
Or in your urine.
Oh, okay.
Like your urine can end up like smelling sweet.
Ooh.
Don't drink it. But
it's the antithesis of asparagus.
So by drinking urine that has filtered all the toxins, because your body wants to eat and utilize the resources you're giving it. But there are things that it can't absorb or things that it doesn't want to absorb, so it passes through.
Yeah.
So by drinking the waste, your urine, you're consuming these toxins that your body explicitly intended to remove. So it can lead to kidney damage, kidney disease, as those organs need to work harder to handle the increased concentration of toxic substances.
Damn.
So every time you keep drinking urine that has been, like, let's say you keep drinking your own urine over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, that's straight up kidney failure.
Yeah. So it just keeps compounding the amount of toxins that you have.
Exactly.
Like compound interest in the bank. Good thing for money.
Bad thing for your kidneys.
Boom. Yeah. Wow. So, okay. The moral of the story is if you can't find any other way to get high, we shouldn't say high. If you can't find any other way to alter your state of consciousness using Amanita muscaria, and you have to resort to pee, just think about what impact that's going to have on your liver.
Yeah. I mean, now if you're stranded on a boat in the ocean, your pee is less of a toxin than the salt water. So drink your pee.
Boom. And if it happens to have Amanita muscaria, then it's a bonus.
Then you might not actually be floating in the ocean.
Oh, that's funny. So, did you have any other wisdom for us, Bouette? I think we educated the audience pretty well today.
I think that was enough education for one episode. You'll have to tune in next time.
Fucking A. All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Walk with me, baby, come on and talk with me, come on and take me downtown. Well, walk with me, baby, come on and talk with me, come on and take me downtown. Well, walk with me, baby, talk with me, take me downtown. Well, walk with me, baby, talk with me, take me downtown.